Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that a number you have never paid attention to has been quietly running your life. Not your salary, not your rent, not the balance in your checking account, a different number. One that economists know, bankers use every day, and yet almost no one explains to ordinary people. That number is $37,000, and understanding why it changes everything might be the most important financial integral you never learned in school. Let us start with a simple scenario. You are at your kitchen table on a Tuesday evening. The dishwasher is running. The light above the stove has been flickering for 3 weeks. You open your banking app just to check before bed, and there it is. Your savings account reads $37,000. Not a fortune. Not enough to buy a house or quit your job or retire early. Just a number that feels solid, but unremarkable. What if that exact number, not 50,000 or 20,000, but specifically 37,000, represents a hidden threshold in how money works? What if crossing that line changes not just what you can buy, but how your brain makes decisions, how risk feels, and which opportunities even become visible to you? To understand this, we have to talk about financial psychology and something called the liquidity threshold. Most people think about wealth in straight lines: earn more, save more, get richer. But the reality is that money behaves like water finding its level. Below a certain point, every financial decision is shaped by scarcity. Above that point, the shape of decision-making itself transforms. Researchers who study household finance have identified a fascinating pattern. When liquid savings cross approximately 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses, something shifts. For the median American household, basic monthly expenses hover around $6,000. 3 months is $18,000. 6 months is $36,000. $37,000 sits just past that 6-month cushion. Why does that matter? Because once you have 6 months of expenses sitting in accessible cash, your relationship with risk changes. You can take that slightly riskier job. You can wait for a better opportunity instead of accepting the first offer. You can walk away from a bad situation without panic. Financial psychologists call this the "fuck you" threshold, though they use more professional language in academic papers. The core idea is simple. When your survival is not on the line for the next half year, your brain stops making fear-based choices, and that is where wealth actually begins to compound. Not in the numbers, but in the quality of decisions you make. Let us look at the math behind this threshold. Suppose you have $15,000 saved. That is about 2.5 months of expenses. You lose your job. The clock starts ticking loudly. You will take almost any new job that comes along, even if it pays less or offers no growth. You will cash out investments at the wrong time because you need the money now. You will avoid necessary expenses like car repairs or dental work, letting small problems become expensive emergencies later. The expected value of your next decision is negative because you are choosing from a position of weakness. Now, suppose you have $37,000. That is 6 months of expenses with a small buffer. You lose the same job. The clock ticks much more quietly. You can afford to spend 2 months searching for the right role. You can negotiate salary because you're not desperate. You can take a certification course or learn a new skill before re-entering the job market. You can even consider relocating to a better job market without panicking about the moving costs. Each decision you make now has a higher expected value because you have the luxury of time and choice. Over a decade, that one threshold might be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in improved outcomes, not from investment returns, but from better decision-making alone. The behavioral economists Sendil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir call this scarcity mindset. When people have less than they need, their cognitive bandwidth shrinks. They become worse at planning, worse at impulse control, and worse at seeing long-term consequences. It is not a character flaw. It is a neurological fact. Scarcity captures attention so completely that there is no room left for strategic thinking. Their research found that sugarcane farmers in India scored significantly lower on IQ tests before harvest when money was tight, and significantly higher after harvest when cash was available. The same farmers, same intelligence, different financial circumstances. The difference in test performance was equivalent to losing a full night of sleep or about 10 IQ points. Now translate that to your daily life. Below $37,000 in liquid savings, your brain is operating with a mild but constant cognitive tax. You make worse financial decisions not because you are uneducated or lazy, but because scarcity has hijacked your attention. You pay late fees because you forgot the due date while worrying about something else. You take out high-interest loans because you cannot see the alternative. You stay in bad jobs because the risk of leaving feels catastrophic. Above $37,000, that cognitive tax disappears. You are not rich. You are not even comfortable by upper-middle-class standards. But you are free from the most damaging form of poverty, the poverty of attention. There is a second hidden effect of this threshold that has nothing to do with psychology and everything to do with systemic mechanics. The financial system is not designed to serve people below certain asset levels. This is not a conspiracy. It is simply a matter of transaction costs. Banks, brokerages, and investment firms make money from fees. If you have $5,000 to invest, many strategies are unavailable to you because the fees would eat any possible return. If you have $37,000, suddenly, a universe of slightly better options opens up. You can buy treasury bills directly instead of paying a money market fund fee. You can open brokerage accounts that waive fees for balances over a certain amount. You can access certificates of deposit with meaningful yields. You can even start considering small real estate investments through crowdfunding platforms that have minimums around $25,000. The difference between $15,000 and $37,000 is not just a bigger number. It is a different category of financial participation. Below the threshold, you are paying more for worse services. Above the threshold, you start paying less for better services. The system rewards the people who can already afford to be rewarded. That sounds unfair, and it is, but understanding the mechanism allows you to target it directly. Your goal is not to become a millionaire overnight. Your goal is to cross the line where the system stops working against you and starts working for you. For most Americans, that line is $37,000. Let us talk about how this threshold interacts with debt. Conventional financial advice says you should pay off high-interest debt before building savings. But the math on that advice changes depending on how close you are to the liquidity threshold. Suppose you have credit card debt at 20% interest and you have $10,000 in savings. The pure math says, put that $10,000 toward the debt. But if that $10,000 is all you have, paying down debt might drop you below your survival buffer. Then, one unexpected car repair or medical bill forces you to borrow again, often at even higher rates. You end up in a debt spiral where you never make progress. The smarter approach for many people is to prioritize reaching the $37,000 liquidity threshold, even if it means carrying some high-interest debt for a while. Because once you have that 6-month cushion, you can aggressively attack debt from a position of safety. You will not have to re-borrow when an emergency hits. You will not have to choose between paying interest and eating dinner. The math changes because the psychology changes. This is counterintuitive. Most financial influencers would never say, carry credit card debt to build savings. But the research on household financial stability suggests that liquidity matters more than interest rates for people in the bottom half of the wealth distribution. Being debt-free but cash poor leaves you one broken refrigerator away from disaster. Being moderately indebted but liquid leaves you able to handle shocks while systematically reducing the debt. Historical financial parallels help us understand why this specific number keeps appearing. Look at the data from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances. When researchers segment households by liquid savings, they find a sharp discontinuity in financial outcomes right around the 3 to 6 month expense range. Households below that range have high rates of missed payments, high rates of borrowing for basic needs, and very low rates of investment participation. Households above that range look dramatically different even when their total net worth is similar. Two households with $50,000 in net worth can have completely different trajectories if one has $37,000 in cash and the other has $50,000 in retirement accounts but only $2,000 in cash. The liquid household can handle job loss. The illiquid household cannot. This is why financial advisors often recommend keeping emergency savings separate from investment accounts. The penalty for early withdrawal from retirement accounts is not just the tax hit, it is the psychological barrier that makes people avoid accessing that money even when they should. If your only savings are locked away, you will let small problems become big ones because pulling money out feels too costly. $37,000 in a high-yield savings account, accessible within a day, changes that calculation completely. You can use it when you genuinely need it, and because you have it, you will need it less often. There is a beautiful irony here. The best way to avoid using your emergency fund is to have one. Knowing that the money exists reduces the anxiety that leads to poor decisions, and reduced anxiety leads to fewer actual emergencies. When you are not constantly worried about money, you sleep better, work better, and think more clearly. You notice opportunities that were always there but invisible under the fog of scarcity. You take better care of your health, which reduces medical bills. You maintain your car and home, which reduces repair costs. The threshold is self-reinforcing. Below it, small problems compound into crises. Above it, small problems stay small. Let us zoom out to the systemic level. Why is the number 37,000 and not 40,000 or 30,000? Because it is tied to median household expenses. In 2024, the median monthly spending for a single person in the United States was about $4,500. For a family of 4, about $8,000. But the single person and the family of 4 have different thresholds. The principle stays the same. 6 months of your actual expenses. For the median American household, that number is currently around $37,000. If your expenses are lower, your threshold is lower. If you live in a high-cost city, your threshold is higher. The specific number matters less than the concept. Find your personal 6-month expense number. That is your liquidity target. What changes when you cross that line? You stop asking whether you can afford something and start asking whether it is worth it. That shift sounds subtle, but it transforms every financial decision. Can you afford a $15 lunch? The question is irrelevant because the answer is almost always yes. But is that $15 lunch worth it compared to packing something from home? That question forces you to think about value, not scarcity. And thinking about value is how you build wealth over time. People who live below the liquidity threshold spend enormous mental energy on questions of survival. People above it spend that same mental energy on questions of optimization. Over a decade, optimization beats survival by a wide margin. You might be thinking that $37,000 is an impossible target. Maybe you are living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe your expenses are higher than your income. Maybe you have debt that feels crushing. That is exactly why understanding the threshold matters. Because you cannot solve a problem until you can see it clearly. The path to $37,000 is not magic. It is math. Increase income, decrease expenses, or most powerfully, do both. But the key insight is that the first 10,000 is harder than the next 27,000. Once you build momentum and cross the initial psychological barriers, the process accelerates. Not because of compound interest, though that helps, but because your brain starts working better. Let us close with an identity shift. You are not trying to become a rich person. You are trying to become a person who does not make fear-based financial decisions. That is a smaller, clearer, more achievable goal, and it has a known price tag. For most people, that price tag is $37,000 in liquid savings. Once you have that, you have bought back your attention, your decision quality, and your ability to see opportunities. You are still the same person with the same income and the same skills, but you are operating from a different part of your brain, the part that plans instead of panics, the part that builds instead of survives. That is what changes everything, not the money itself, what the money allows you to become. So here is the calm, practical closing. Calculate your monthly expenses, multiply by 6. That is your target. Ignore every other financial goal until you hit that number. No investing, no paying down low-interest debt, no buying things you do not need. Just build that 6-month cushion. It will take time. That is fine. The only way to fail is to quit before you cross the line. And once you cross it, you will feel something unexpected. Not excitement, not relief exactly. A quiet sense that the world has more room to move than you thought. That is the feeling of financial psychology working in your favor for the first time. Hold on to that. It is worth more than $37,000, but you need the $37,000 to get there.